Fontaine is coming up soon, but before we begin dipping our toes in the waters, I think it's time to look back on the information we've had lingering for years. So welcome to everything we know about Fontaine from 1.0 to probably 3.5 to 3.6, because I haven't been playing 3.7 in a while. Life has not been lifing well. Disclaimer, normally I compile the information in such a way that flows like an essay, but for this one, I'm going to be treating this like an appendix, where I just list down what we know and state it like fact. I'm putting this down through chronological order, with the oldest information we have first, then trickling down into the newer information. Furthermore, I'm more interested in compiling the old ones that we have into digestible bites instead of looking at the newer information. It's just so that we have a track record, since a lot of the old tidbits about Fontaine can disappear into the night, given that, again, years. So this will be from the very beginning until 3.7, since I haven't played 3.8 completely. Anyway, let's begin. Fontaine has been talked about multiple times years ago, with the most defining aspect of it being its beauty. The NPC Francis gave us a cursory glance into the romantic vibes of the nation of Hydro. My home is a country that reveres true beauty and elegance. Some people from other countries may find our dress sense showy and impractical, but for us, there is nothing more commonplace. Fontaine's first true reveal was in the trailer to VOT chapter storyline preview, under the title of The Quest Masquerade of the Guilty. There is a line written in Tevat's Latin, which roughly means justice conquers all. Furthermore, Dainsif's dialogue says, "The god of justice lives for the spectacle of the courtroom, seeking to judge all other gods. But even she knows not to make an enemy of the divine." The two individuals who have ever attained the title of Hydro Archon are the Lord of Amrita and Fossilor. The Lord of the Sweet Dew perished during the Cataclysm 503 years ago, and her consciousness was kept by Greater Lord Rukkhadevta when she was slain. The Lord has been stained by corruption and was allegedly unable to be reborn into a purer plane. As such, Rukkhadevta put her consciousness into the world to be anchored to the mortal realm, though the name Amrita sounds distinctly in line with Sumeru's dialect, so I definitely think she has more of a Fontainian name alongside her demon name from the Ars Goetia. When Fossilor became her successor, Fontaine was essentially reinvented to the way that it is now. How much such a change affected the state of affairs is currently unknown to us, but we do know that the Lock folk such as Rodea were deathly loyal to the previous Hydro Archon, to the point of defying Fossilor's title completely. The Steambird is a newspaper of Fontaine and is also considered as the main newspaper of the court. It's more or less an international paper, with readers and writers across the continent. There are two columns that have been revealed before: Mona's All Things Astrological and Long Urgence Tevat Food Notes. Mona's contributions to a column about constellations in the Steambird have become her most stable source of income. She has written a manuscript for the Steambird on celestial shifts and their relation to a person's changing fates. The Steambird also covers lore regarding different core events in the story, such as the Traveler's battle against the Valen, which made headlines for 3 weeks. The articles on it included expert interviews and high-quality hand-drawn illustrations. The newspaper characterized the Traveler as a straight-shooting knight-errant who prefers to let their blade do the talking. Conversely, Kazuha made it to headlines for blocking the Muso no Hitatachi. The Iridescence Tour is a famous music festival that originates from Fontaine. This is the event that was mentioned in 2.2 by Sinyon, and then in the Lantern Rite Festival, in which different artists from across the world would perform to showcase their music. Following this, rock and roll came to Liyue from Fontaine. Because of its rambunctious style of music, though, it clashed with Liyue's more mellow, traditional music sense. That's why Sinyon says that most people think that it's an awful racket. Rock and roll originates in Fontaine and is starting to find its feet in Liyue Harbour, where Sinyon is pioneering the art. As the hub of creative literature, Saint Cho's novel, A Legend of Sword, is extremely popular in Fontaine, compared to its popularity in Liyue, which was nearly non-existent. Now that we talked about that, let's talk about the first peaks of Fontaine's advancement in technology versus the other cities. Now, as a pioneer of most industrial innovations in Tevat, Fontaine is known for their many machinations and machinery. The Mikage Furnace is one of the two creations that help create and facilitate. The Mikage Furnace is one of the current creations that they helped create and facilitate. Fontaine's contributions to this are twofold. One is the use of the reputation by El Dottore to fool the people of the Mikage Furnace into trusting the innovative enhancement of the furnace, and the second one is that they actually helped with the maintenance, which is why Xavier was there during the World Quest. A few years ago, for the purpose of expanding production capacity, they hired a team of consultants from Fontaine. They built the Mikage Furnace, a machine that can fully harvest the power of the Tatarigami. After the Mikage Furnace started production, most of the consultant team returned to Fontaine. Only Xavier, who we just mentioned, stayed behind in Inazuma. But during one of the previous battles, something went wrong with the furnace. The part that stored the corrupt Tatarigami energy became extremely unstable. Work was halted in Tatarasuna and everyone was evacuated shortly after. Xavier took emergency action, and he seems to have set up a containment dome around the Mikage Furnace. According to Xavier, though, Fontaine's regulations when it comes to emergency situations are less than splendid. Back in his homeland of Fontaine, they would normally have a vision-wielding expert diagnose the problem. Then, they would form a dedicated review panel to discuss and raise proposals, approve a solution, then organize the remedial work. But with Inazuma being the way that it is now, all he can do is try to determine what might be going on through naked eye observations and his imagination. He also mentions that there exists an 893-page long document known as the Mikage Furnace Emergency Response Procedures, trial version, which may require revision. When Ramsay created the fabricated international travelogue, he included Fontaine. In the book, he puts it so that Fontaine has a kind of iron carriage that flies in the sky. It runs along an invisible road, allegedly. That book itself is fabricated, but Ramsay says, though, that not everything is based on the imaginary. For example, in the travelogue, someone made a super balloon. Then he summoned his friends and planned to travel around Tivat in this balloon in 80 days. Also, this balloon does not require a vision to operate. All it takes is some technical knowledge. These people travel around the world in the balloon and they encounter various strange things and phenomena along the way. This might be a reference to the book 80 Days Around the World. Speaking of technology, the energy system of Fontaine is different compared to the other nations. More so in the regard that other nations may not even have a unified energy system. Bertrand says that Fontaine is the most convenient place to live in for some people, but for others, it is not but a place of grief and disappointment. The energy system is special, but no one knows how long it can be sustained. Thus, they must find alternative energy solutions before it all comes crashing down. But the problem with researching alternative forms of energy is also because of the instability of the practice, which is why he endeavors to conduct his research away from Fontaine. Now let's talk about the little knickknacks from Fontaine that we've seen so far. Certain world events have several items that are also from the nation. You can tell that this is Fontainian, considering their connection to clockwork, or their uniqueness compared to a lot of the other nations' gadgets being somewhat more primitive. The Wisdom Orb is an event item from the fabulous Fungus Frenzy that is used to capture and command fungi. Bertrand, the toy maker from Fontaine, was also used to making little toys from clockwork for mass production. However, due to the rushed preparations and a lack of helping hands, it is not impossible to say that there are accidents along the way. Bertrand also made something called the Great Machine, which is a little toy that uses an alternative form of energy. Another inventor created the Evermotional Mechanical Painting, which is a form of clockwork device that can be wound up like a spring. With that, Felix created a perpetual motion toy powered by a kinesis core to show off its capabilities. The Evermotion Mechanical Painting is made from many interlocking parts. If you so much as initiate a small amount of movement, this painting can remain in automatic motion for a long period of time, allowing you to safely leave it unattended. Hopefully it doesn't explode. The Fontaine Research Institute of Kinetic Energy Engineering is an organization in Fontaine that is dubbed as a paradise for researchers. However, according to Augustus Lovelace, it is where most mechanical creations originated from. But thanks to Mr. Edwin, most buildings in the Fontaine Research Institute are lying in ruin now. Unlike the Sumeru Academia, there's hardly any administrative responsibility over the people of Fontaine, which makes this institution more so an independent one instead of a formal facilitating body. This can have its own repercussions though, considering that you're dealing with technology. The person who established the Fontaine Research Institute is known as Alain Guillotin. One of the main projects that the Research Institute has was to address the Waterline Crisis from René's investigation notes and presently ongoing crisis research. As far as we are aware, there are two currently named races exclusive to Fontaine. These are the Lockfolk and the Melusine. But I'm sure we'll get more in the future considering the richness of French literature. Or more or less so European literature, honestly. The Lockfolk or the Oceanids are species made of pure hydro energy. They predated the rule of the current Archon as they were created during the previous one. The Lord tasked them with spreading love all over Tivat and connecting everyone through the purity of the water. However, when Fossilor came into power, the Lockfolk disagreed with her order. At the moment, it's unknown if this is because their power was abused by Fossilor or simply because of conflicting interests. But regardless, the Lockfolk left on a self-imposed exile. This is the reason why Rodea is in Liyue at the moment. The other race was name dropped as Melusine. They look like fawn-like, almost fae-like creatures. They're known to be diligent facilitators of justice, and they will do their best to uphold order, or at least its fundamentals, throughout the land. The camera and the film are new additions to the roster of Teyvatian technology. This is mentioned by Xavier in his World Quest, where he developed the creation of cinematography and had us act in the Tatara Tales. There are NPCs who discuss the current state of Fontaine as being dangerously polluted and is filled by toxic fumes. There are also some NPCs that mention that the current state of Fontaine is nearly inhabitable, which is actually really fascinating when you look at the city featured in the trailer. There is also currently an ongoing waterline crisis that the Institute is hoping to fix. Easy to say that despite Fontaine's glamorous technology, they aren't doing a good job mitigating the waste that those very same technology produce. Now we move on to the legal system. The legal system of Fontaine has been criticized by Yanfei as being difficult and overall complicated, especially as a primary judicial unit. Other NPCs have also noted that the process is beyond taxing, and that the people have been experiencing hefty taxes for the tiniest of infractions. Patrice says that these can be considered as crimes if not handled properly. For example, if academic researchers from Fontaine are unable to produce thorough results, this will be seen as wasting public funds and misappropriating academic resources. Poaching or illegal hunting is also considered a crime. The Court of Fontaine is also allegedly the ruling judicial body, in which it is a court composed of ethereal beauties and maidens. Apparently in Fontaine, there is a kind of transportation system known as aquarails. Aquabuses are dedicated vehicles that use them. Not only are they fast and convenient, they have Melusine guides on board who will provide commentary on the scenery. This dialogue is from Augustus Lovelace. The Narzissenkreuz Institute was an organization in Fontaine from 500 years ago. According to the lore, the nymph's dream states its members through pseudonyms instead of complete names, like Tiny Champion and Little Girl. Apparently, afternoon tea and parties were regular parts of their routine, and they would play their roles of champions, mages, and evil creatures. I'll cover more about these people in the future because I want to save their lore for something else. One of the earliest warnings about Fontaine actually came from Libin, who said that the people of Fontaine are currently at unease. The atmosphere of Fontaine has shifted and has become quite oppressive. He says that the locals are quite angsty, believing that judgment is soon to come. What that entails, though, is unknown and difficult to pinpoint at the moment. Now let's move on to the locations. Petrichor is a town in Fontaine that is a hometown to the researcher Xavier. The town is known for its beautiful pure waters and has been known to have a majestic waterfall. Fleuve Cendre is a location mentioned by Alice, and apparently that's where a small Melusine patrols the area by herself. Alice hints that in the event that there are any suspicious activities, such as an unknown outlander, this small Melusine will watch their every move. When we see this in the trailer, it appears as though it's the under area of the city. Opera Epiclese is a location mentioned in Linny's character introduction. According to the introduction, the location doubles as both a hall for trials and a performance hall for Linny and Lynette's magic shows. Luminous Harbour is a location in Fontaine that allows for travel in Chenyu Vale. Romaritime Harbour, on the other hand, is a harbour in Fontaine that allows for travel into the Sumeru deserts. And that's it for me today. This video is really just meant to take a further look into what we knew about Fontaine from years ago before we dive into the bigger information about new characters, lore, and locations. Fontaine is going to be massive and I really hope that you guys stick around. And if you want to see more from me, check me out over at freshcut.gg, where I post random shorts about both Genshin lore or behind the scenes stuff. Anyway, my name is Aster and thank you for chilling with me. Bye bye! The Narzissenkreuz Institution. I was so close.